Today we witness the ultimate gladiator bout. The Dark Knight, the Cape Crusader versus the friendly neighborhood web slinger. Who will win this match and who will walk away in shame and defeat? The bout of the century is upon us and there can only be one winner. It is time, so let's go. The superhero genre has seen a massive surge in the entertainment industry in the last 15 years. Ever since Robert Downey Jr.'s Iron Man released in 2008, it's been almost a certainty that one or more comic book movies is in the list of the 10 highest grossing films of the respective year. So with the unprecedented love and monetary benefit that the genre received, it's no wonder that the gaming industry wanted a piece of this juicy pie. In 2009, we saw the release of one of the, if not the greatest superhero games ever made, Batman Arkham Asylum, which ushered in a new era of critically and commercially successful game franchises based on comic book characters, with Rocksteady Studios leading by example. And to the mind-blowing surprise of fans, the sequel Batman Arkham City was somehow even better. Not only had the game mechanics been vastly upgraded, but we also got to see a story that could rival the best in Hollywood. Add to that the fact that it had some of the best gameplay, visuals and ending, and Rocksteady made sure their next game breaks the bank. So when the culmination of the series Batman Arkham Knight hit the market in 2015, it was like wildfire. The game was unfortunately marred by technical issues and a few undesirable gameplay and plot points. But despite those tiny flaws, it's still, in my humble opinion, the best game in the trilogy. Or quadrilogy, depends on who you talk to really. But Arkham Knight had everything. The best representation of Gotham to date. Yeah, it's even better than 2022's The Batman. And for that matter, the best Batman to ever grace the screen, and gameplay that quite simply put was addictive. And despite there being mixed opinions about which game in the trilogy is the best, let there be no doubt in your minds that Arkham Knight is without the shadow of doubt the flagship game of the franchise. And although the series ended on a rather high note, it left a void. One that I thought was impossible to fill. FYI, I'll be taking into account Spiderman Remastered for this bout, as we want the best against the best. After 3+ years of average entries into the genre, we got to see the changing of the guard. Marvel's Spider-Man, a game which took the industry by storm. Everyone was talking about it and wanted a piece of the action. It was simply breathtaking in nearly every conceivable way, and it finally quenched the thirst of fans of the genre who were waiting for a spectacle from years. It was in fact so good that it bled into mainstream entertainment, and even non-gamers gave it a go and fell in love with it. The last time we saw such an effect was when Arkham Asylum released, and even though the tonality and approach were almost the exact opposite to Arkham, the excellence was still there. With beauty and vibrance occupying each frame as opposed to the grim and dark setting of Arkham, and a fresh and highly polished combat system, which again was addictive, taking center stage. But the crown jewel was still the plot, a story that's as memorable as it is emotionally charged, and with nearly flawless execution. We got yet another masterpiece, and that's not even up for debate, because it's almost universally accepted. But now comes the truly intriguing question: which game is better? Which of these visually striking and narratively breathtaking masterpieces is the true winner in a battle for the ages? I've seen a ton of shots and gameplay comparisons, but I'm yet to see someone pitch these two games head to head and break it down with details in order to find out which one really comes out on top. So I thought to myself, I have a channel, a few thousand subs, why not get the job done myself? So in this video today, it's Batman Arkham Knight versus Marvel's Spider-Man. So how in the hell are we supposed to figure out which amongst the two is better? While one game has the past, the legacy and continuing narrative aspect on its side, the other has future. Basically the technological improvements and latest game engines along with an ever-growing fan base thanks to the record-breaking numbers MCU Spider-Man trilogy and the Spider-Verse have done. But both the Arkham series and Insomniac Spider-Man are spectacles in their own way, and fans of the respective games or franchises would defend it till kingdom come. So let's get down to the basics. specifics and dissect each aspect. I feel that the visuals and the world are two facets that go perfectly hand in hand, so I thought, why not put them under one umbrella and save some time? Arkham Knight to this day holds up as one of the most visually stunning games of all time. Be it the highly polished nature of the environment, especially the rain, the art style which shows Gotham as an urban hell which is all skyscrapers and massive commercial projects on top, and a crumbling, rotting hellhole at its very core. Or the jaw-dropping details in the world, like subtle references to other characters in DC and layout, which is in every shape and form memorable. Other tiny specifics like the way Batmobile scrapes the side off of walls when it brushes against them, or the environmental damage this machine of chaos inflicts, which the Batmobile does a ton of, all add to the visual appeal. From destroying phone booths, trees and trash cans to all gates, railings and street side signs. It causes absolute carnage. Speaking of the Batmobile, it looks spectacular and the design totally justifies the billion-dollar tank remark. And the city itself looks gorgeous at night with neon signs covering the sky, wide roads that allows Batman to zoom about in his destructive beast of a tank, or the beautiful yet melancholic comic book feel that the visuals exude. There's also skyscrapers, housing projects and commercial areas in every direction, and Batman looking over the city like a knight in a rather dark armor. Also, the character designs never look better. Each iteration is right off of the comic books. Be it the old, exhausted yet dedicated police commissioner Gordon, Oracle, Robin, and Joker, who I feel looked better in Arkham City, and even the common criminals who are dressed according to the boss that they support. But the two characters that stood out are Scarecrow and Batman, who coincidentally are the antagonist and protagonist respectively. While Scarecrow looks like a crazed, out of his mind emissary of death right out of one's nightmares, Batman looks like the perfect hero or even the perfect man. A 6'2", 210-pound beast of a human. This version of the Bat definitely fits the bill of peak human condition more than any of his Hollywood counterparts ever did. Christian Bale was great but a bit too short and narrow to play Batman. Pattinson when shirtless looks like he needs a goddamn sandwich. Keaton, Kilmer and Clooney were meh. And Affleck, who I felt was the best, just felt too much like a brawler and not the martial arts expert that the Dark Knight is. Those broad shoulders, his towering presence, or the sheer focus in his eyes and the bat suit. My goodness, what an improvement from the rather average spandex suit of City and Asylum. The Iron Man-like spalders and chest plate, the cowl which makes him look like the devil clad in black, or his ever so trustworthy and practically useful cape, which by the way looks ridiculously realistic, especially when you glide during rain. The way it brushes off water and opens up, it's all exemplary and fits the setting perfectly. And despite being released 8 long years ago, it still holds up as one of the finest. And that's without a remaster, which I don't even think it needs. Now for Marvel's Spider-Man. One of the, if not the best game cities ever. Bright skies, lavish rooftops, skyscrapers that are built beyond the clouds or the busy streets of New York. And if you climb atop one of said skyscrapers and look around, it's an almost blissful experience. Also, Spidey swinging around in the city never looked better. What I especially loved was the inclusion of buildings like the Avengers Tower and the Sanctum Sanctorum, as they add a certain mystique to the world and also add an opportunity for other characters to cameo or perhaps have a game of their own sometime down the lane within the same universe. Speaking of the web slinger, Spider-Man looks extremely comic accurate, but that's been the case for almost 2 decades now. Almost every iteration of Spidey has been great if not perfect. Tobey Maguire is still etched into the memory of all millennials as the quintessential Spider-Man. Andrew Garfield is highly underrated in my humble opinion, and Tom Holland fits the bill rather well. But this was possible because the description of Spider-Man isn't as extreme as the Cape Crusaders. I mean, it's way easier to find 5'7" to 5'10" men who have lean and fit builds than it is to find a 6'2" behemoth who has tree trunks for arms and is also ripped to bones all day every day. But the side characters really hit the mark. Mary Jane, the best on-screen one in fact. Silver Sable, whew. Doc Ock, who perfectly fits the role of a manipulative, conniving and deceptive genius, or Aunt May, who thankfully isn't sexualized and hence has genuine mom vibes. Sorry Marissa Tomei fans, the entire visual aspect is great, absolutely it is. But from what I saw, it doesn't have the visual dazzle that Arkham did. The character designs and overall visual aspect did deliver to the fullest, no doubt, but I feel the art design and execution of Arkham Knight edges Spider-Man Remastered out by just a bit. And that's despite Spider-Man getting a remaster, which speaks volumes about the Arkham team. Also, Gotham City is a great representation of what a real near-dystopian metropolitan city would look like in a superhero setting. I do understand that Spider-Man's New York isn't supposed to be grim and at the brink of collapse, but such a setting doesn't entail any wow factor, as it's a city that many people actually live in currently, which doesn't allow the creators to go berserk in a good way. Arkham Knight takes the first point. This section contains some spoilers, so if you're one of the unfortunate few who hasn't played these two games yet, and in case you're still watching, I'll see to it that I leave enough out for you to still have a great experience when and if you decide to play them. When it comes to the story of these games, Arkham Knight has the luxury of having 3 full games worth of narrative build-up, which happened over a span of 6 years on its side. From the very first time Batman arrived to the asylum with Joker in tow to the last evening of the Caped Crusaders' journey. It was magical to say the least. But let's talk about Arkham Knight's story. It's one that's full of twists and turns, one that leaves a full-grown man crying into his pillow. So this is the plot in a nutshell. Scarecrow is back and now has billions of dollars of funding from all the supervillains in town, and a trusted general, the Arkham Knight, a mysterious figure hell-bent on ending the Caped Crusaders' mythos and life, who's later revealed to be a character from Batman's past. Scarecrow is on a mission to turn Gotham into the city of fear by releasing his weapon of death, the fear gas, which has now been perfected. Meanwhile, Batman is infected with the Joker's blood, which would turn him into the clown prince of crime unless Robin could find a cure for it. And throughout the story, we see snippets of how Batman begins to understand and accept that his very existence means more and more threats loom over Gotham, and the people will never truly be safe. And after a batshit crazy night, pun intended, Batman's identity is finally revealed and the Dark Knight goes. The developers had a mighty task while making Batman Arkham Knight, because they had to wrap up 6 years of storytelling without any loose ends. And Spider-Man, on the other hand, has a heart-wrenching yet blissful story. We see Peter Parker, who's a full-time crime fighter by now, unwind a dark and disturbing conspiracy. This story is built in such a way that although you know who the villains are, you will never see their heel turn coming. So after a superpowered Asian gang starts occupying New York and its underworld, Spidey starts taking notice of how those he believed to be good are anything but that. A story of losing faith, losing loved ones to death and the dark side, but discovering hope and a new purpose while reconnecting with old friends and making new ones. And all of this without any major cliffhangers. The unfortunate reality is that although I personally love the Arkham series, I gotta admit, Spider-Man's story and screenplay are just superior. Problem is that Arkham Knight tries to build up characters that were not even mentioned previously, while bringing back ones that had no business being back, like the Joker. His story arc had ended perfectly in Arkham City, but no, the creators went to the well once too often and really ruined the effect Arkham City had. There are also some major plot points which would make you go, what? So when compared to the story of Marvel's Spider-Man, which is very well balanced and laid out, Arkham Knight falls flat. The way they've intertwined the best aspects of Peter's universe, like characters from his past, side bosses that leave an impact, Easter eggs that are subtly sprinkled all across New York, and the way the main story connects all of these aspects and everything else in Spidey's world is mind-blowing. So it's no surprise that the web slinger comes out on top. Spidey takes this point. Arkham Knight takes the good old-fashioned approach of keeping parts of the map and major upgrades sealed before we cross certain points in the game. Hence, you have to earn every single improvement, and there's a perpetual sense of intrigue as to what will happen next or how the next part of the map could be. You technically could go to set parts, but take my word for it, it's pretty difficult to survive, especially in the first few playthroughs. It works perfectly as there's a feel that Batman is holding back 1 or 2 major tricks under his sleeve at all times. And and in doing so, they make you ever so invested in the happenings of the plot as you keep wondering, how will the Bat get out of this? And voila! He reaches into his goodie bag and pulls up something so incredible, it'll leave you satisfied to the fullest. But let's talk about the missions and side missions which form the crux of the game. Although the main story has been laid out in a way which keeps building on the thrill as the levels go by, unlocking new secrets and building up steam in the plot, the side missions are unfortunately quite repetitive. Almost all side bosses have 3, 4 or a little more of the same missions in different locations. The innovation in this part seems rather lackluster. Also, the heavy inclusion of the Batmobile into the story has been criticized by players who felt it became forced after a point, whereas Spider-Man has a different approach. The only things inaccessible are some inconsequential abilities that have little to no effect on the main story, which means the entire playground is open for exploration. Honestly speaking, you can steer clear of any upgrades and still make it through the entire main story without much difficulty. Now what this does is that it greatly reduces the excitement in gameplay, because other than the unfolding plot, which as I noted was great, there really isn't much to look forward to. The missions and side missions are definitely fun but not very exciting, because although they add context to the story of Spidey, the stakes never seem to get that high until very late into the game. You see, Arkham Knight's level design is so much superior as every new location and scenario is unique. It really builds anticipation and Arkham Knight even manages to deliver on it. Yes, Spider-Man is great too in its own way, but I feel in the grand scheme of things, the level design took a backseat during development and too much emphasis went towards the visuals and writing, which shows. Arkham Knight takes this point. They are both fun, fast-paced and exciting, but unfortunately only one can win. Arkham Knight first, and let's start with the traversal. I personally feel that the Batmobile, although a bit overused, was a highly underrated aspect of the game. It was innovative, exciting and gave a whole new dimension to the Dark Knight's arsenal, which already had some pretty impressive items like the explosive gel and the detective vision to name a few. The way Batmobile zooms around Gotham at unbelievable speeds and agility is a thing of beauty. And even when on foot, Bats can go from point A to point B in minutes. And it's a lot of fun. The infusion of higher levels of boost into the grapnel made it a treat to zip around the city. And the dive bomb has always been my favorite as it shows the fearless nature of Bats, who literally falls off of skyscrapers without hesitation, and it also allows you to scare the thugs right out of their boots. But on the other hand, Spider-Man's traversal is on a different level. The web-slinger's agility, control and skills are superhuman. The way he moves around so nimbly and with such insane speed is a thing of beauty. Spider-Man's traversal gives the players an extraordinary amount of freedom to choose how they go about, which in turn makes you feel more like a superhero than ever. They've also added a ton of fancy moves like perfectly passing through the bases of water tanks or sewage pipes, getting a speed boost when a player makes a well-timed jump off of ledges, and a lot of acrobatic moves that can be performed mid-air. Spider-Man definitely takes the traversal part. Now for the combat, which I feel is the most important aspect of gameplay. Arkham Knight's combat is what people call fully developed. They took every idea they tried in previous games, polished it to perfection and implemented them in such a way which allows the players to take complete charge. You see, Batman is said to be a highly efficient and a near superhuman hand-to-hand combat expert and can hold his own even against enhanced beings. So the combat had to reflect that. And although his basic moveset remains pretty much the same, they have added layers and layers upon said moves, like an upgraded free flow focus which allows the players to operate at insane speeds, mid-combat gadget utilization but with a boost, which if used well would absolutely annihilate or incapacitate multiple enemies at once, and the inclusion of multiple types of enemies ensures we have enough challenge to keep us occupied for days. There's also the Batmobile action, which I'll admit was used one time too many, but I gotta say, it really grew on me over time. It's a different feel to have so much firepower and mobility that you can level an entire battalion without taking so much as a scratch. If you have the skill, that is. And although Spider-Man's combat system is vastly different and entertaining in its own way, it's still miles from reaching perfection. But it gets full points for freshness and innovation, as it was a mighty task to create a system that does not resemble Arkham in any way, shape or form. Spidey is more of an acrobat, so his fighting style reflects that perfectly. He has a vast array of moves, all of them fancy and ridiculously smooth looking. But the good old aerial combat is what really remains in your memory. Spider-Man can stay up there for days.
What? Days?
And the sheer number of permutations and combinations at your disposal is crazy. Also, Spidey has his own set of gadgets, from your web bombs to a suspension matrix, all of which add different dimensions to the combat. But despite that, Arkham Knight takes the combat round because it's that much more fun and, as I mentioned, fully developed. So now it's time to discuss the last facet, stealth. Unfortunately, stealth isn't one of Spider-Man's inherent qualities, and although he uses it quite a bit, there never seems to be a need for Spidey to be absolutely hush, as what he lacks in quietness he more than makes up for in superpowers. And the creators have tried their best to create scenarios where Spidey has to go on silent mode, and they've even added some gadgets for the same for good measure. But it's clear that it's just an attempt on the developers' part to include it just for the sake of it. Whereas on the other hand, Arkham Knight's stealth is top notch. The Cape Crusader of the comics is known to operate like a shadow and scare the shit out of his enemies, and we see that exact thing happen here. Also, the majority of his arsenal is purposed just for that. There's also dream scenarios where you can set up all the traps in the world and take down a dozen enemies in the blink of an eye. And the fear multi-takedown is satisfying beyond belief. Arkham takes this round along with the point for gameplay. But then again, of all the games that I've ever played, Arkham Knight would be the only one that has all three facets of gameplay figured out: traversal, combat, and stealth. So it's no shocker that the Dark Knight took this one. This, I feel, is a vital aspect that's usually not given its due credit. The setting of a game plays a pivotal role in the experience that people have, but the juxtaposition of these two games only makes it harder to decide who takes this particular point, as they both have atmospheres that fit perfectly with their respective lores. On one hand, we have the grim, rainy, near-dystopian metropolitan of Gotham, complete with an underground tunnel system, loads and loads of garbage lying on the sides of streets, and the perfect feel of a city on the brink of collapse. Locations like abandoned orphanages and huge commercial projects being built right on top of poverty-stricken areas, and even little details like newspapers floating around take the atmosphere to another level. And the setting is perfect for Batman to let loose and show his true might. Scarecrow threatening and scaring people enough to evacuate an entire city, and the arrival of a goddamn multi-billion-dollar army with the sole purpose of taking down the Batman, all while he's fighting the greatest battle of his life within his own mind. They couldn't possibly set it up in a better way to show us just how much of a dominant force the Dark Knight is. And kudos to Insomniac, because they've matched the setting almost every step of the way. First off, Spider-Man's New York is a city you'll fall in love with. The people, the scenery, it's all so beautiful you'll want to preserve and protect said beauty. We also saw some dirty back alleys and sidewalks in Chinatown and Harlem, but not once does it feel even remotely dystopian. But then again, it was never meant to. And we see a version of Spider-Man who's already a veteran crime fighter, so it's almost like he's in his prime. It's always good to enter the story at a stage when people already know and respect the titular character. And although the stakes build up over time, the initial setting is of peace and prosperity. Nothing against it, I love peace, but there's no sense of urgency or fear which forces you to spring into action right away. I know it's the first game and it'll take a considerable amount of time to get to that phase, if we ever do for that matter, but being shoved right into the mix of things is what I prefer. I'll give this to Arkham Knight. And now it's time for the big round, because it's Batman vs Spider-Man. Who among the two had the best on-screen representation? which was the portrayal that satisfied age-old fans of their respective comics and made sure that the new players fell in love with them. You see, both heroes are kind of a human embodiment of their cities. Batman is just like Gotham, prospering and powerful on the surface, but crumbling and hurting at the very core, and so is Spider-Man. He represents quintessential New York and all the best parts of it, the vibrance, the boldness and resilience. Peter is just a man trying to make ends meet, living a not so wealthy but yet a happy life, trying to do the right thing as much as he can and trying to preserve the soul of this monumental city, his city. The developers were finally able to make a version of the Bat that I, along with most fans, could consider to be perfect. It's not even just the aforementioned size and look. This version of the Bat, despite being in his physical prime, is completely shattered psychologically. The loss of Talia and Joker on the same night has left him angrier and more miserable than ever. This, in my humble opinion, is the quintessential Batman. It's unfortunate, but the more depressed the portrayal of Batman becomes, the better it gets. You can take Ben Affleck and Robert Pattinson as examples, who were probably two of the most melancholic and coincidentally well-received versions of the Caped Crusader. I feel it has a lot to do with the constant struggle and heartbreak that such a character entails, which the Dark Knight is always able to overcome and rise to the occasion and save others. Psychologically speaking, this is very attractive to most people, as struggle is something every one of us has in their lives, and characters such as this have motivated more people than anyone else on the planet. I do love and even feel good with the positivity and cheerfulness Peter brings to the table, because we see the web slinger go through so much and still not lose his spirit, which is a testament to his toughness and kindness. But I guess it ultimately boils down to preference, because both portrayals are almost perfect in their own way. So as far as a character with depth and complexity goes, Batman takes it every time for me. Sorry, Spidey fans. Finally, a round that's easy. Marvel's Spider-Man has a great album with some memorable soundtracks like 8 Years in the Making and Chasing Down the Devil. And although John Paisano has done a commendable job, the album pales in comparison with the touching and almost haunting experience that the OST of Arkham Knight provides. Be it the gripping and masterful main theme, the adrenaline-pumping insurgency soundtrack, or the heartbreaking All Who Follow You. I spoke about this in my detailed review of Spider-Man as well, about how the tracks are great in-game, but they would hardly compel you to go and find those tracks to listen on repeat. But I can tell you with personal experience, Nick Arundel and David Buckley's Arkham Knight album would do that without a doubt, because they are made in a way which not only enhances the atmosphere, but can even create it without the gameplay. Just listen to the Fear Within soundtrack once. It's out of this world and probably my favorite of the lot. Arkham Knight takes another point. More often than not, the only opportunity that mass superheroes have to convey their emotions is through their voice, as barely any part of their face is ever seen, if any for that matter. So the voice acting, in my estimation, is a highly underrated but vital aspect. The Arkham cast is legendary at this point. Be it Kevin Conroy's Batman, may God rest his soul, who I think has done his best work to date with the character in Arkham Knight, or Mark Hamill's Joker, which has been a benchmark of exemplary voice acting for over 3 decades. That's longer than I've been on this earth. And even amongst such juggernauts, John Noble's Scarecrow, Ashley Green's Oracle/Barbara Gordon, and Jonathan Banks' Commissioner Gordon's voice acting shines brightly. John Noble especially has absolutely killed it with his distinct and outright scary voiceover. Spider-Man's cast, on the other hand, is no pushover. Yuri Lowenthal has done a brilliant job and has established himself as one of the, if not the best Spider-Man voices to date. And his witty, often chucklesome, often hilarious dialogues add even more value to his exceptional work. Laura Bailey as Mary Jane, Nancy Linari as Aunt May, and Tara Platt in the role of Police Captain Yuri Watanabe have all excelled in their given roles. But once again, the sheer quality and legacy of Arkham Knight's cast manages to outshine Spider-Man. Arkham Knight takes one more round. And now it's time for the final battle. And the question is, which amongst the two has left a lasting impact and solidified itself in the annals of gaming history as an example of an extraordinary creation? Without beating around the bush, I'll have to say with a heavy heart might I add, that it's Spider-Man. Let me explain. If it was Arkham City or even Asylum for that matter, I might have given the point to The Dark Knight. But with Spider-Man's extraordinarily constructed storyline, with mind-blowing tonal consistency and execution that leaves nothing out, the web-slinger takes the win. Although Arkham Knight has beaten Spider-Man at most rounds, there's no doubt in my mind that it's Insomniac's Spider-Man which has ushered in a new generation of superhero games and will be remembered forever for the same. At the end of the day, even I, being a die-hard Arkham fan, have to admit that Arkham Knight left much to be desired. The story had many inconsistencies, there was a disturbing lack of boss fights, the side missions were very repetitive, and quite honestly, the plot just wasn't able to create the impact that Arkham Cities did. If anything, it kind of undermined it. And the major technical issues at launch only ensured Arkham Knight never surpasses Arkham City in sheer quality. Spider-Man without any doubt takes the final point. So at the end, Arkham Knight manages to take a landslide victory with 7 points, and Spidey only manages to score 2. Much of this is bound to stir up a ton of controversy in the comments section, but I'd love to have a chat with any and all who have different or same opinions for that matter. Also tell me which game is your personal favorite. I know Arkham Knight took most rounds in this bout, but that doesn't mean Spider-Man isn't a mind-blowing game in its own right. But when the question which game is better arises, all we can do is compare aspects and arrive at a quantifiable solution, as that's the only way of answering said question. With all that being said, if you still love Spider-Man or Arkham Knight and think that it's the best game that's ever made, more power to you. Because we love what we love and don't let a YouTuber like me tell you otherwise. So with that, we reach the end of the video, guys. I'll see you in the next one. Until then, stay safe, stay strong, and stay tuned. It's your boy VZX signing out.